Let me start by first expressing my appreciation to Senator Leahy and Senator Sessions. I have the honor of serving on the Judiciary Committee, and I think our leadership, our chairman, Senator Leahy, and our ranking Republican member, Senator Sessions, conducted the confirmation process in the best tradition of the United States Senate. We had 4 days of hearings before the Judiciary Committee. Every member of the committee was afforded ample opportunity to question Solicitor General Kagan on a far range of issues. And we got complete responses. We had chances for follow-up questions, and we even had a third round of questioning. We had outside witnesses that were before our committee. We had a chance to ask them as third-party validators. We also went through tens of thousands of pages of documents. This was a very thorough confirmation process, a very open confirmation process, and a very fair confirmation process. And I do thank Senator Sessions, the ranking Republican member, for the way that he cooperated with Senator Leahy to make sure that the Senate did its business in getting the full record before voting to confirm Elena Kagan to be an Associate Justice of the Supreme Court of the United States. Solicitor General Elena Kagan has the experience, has the intelligence, has the integrity, has the temperament to serve as an Associate Justice of the Supreme Court of the United States. On her experience, she was the first woman Solicitor General in the history of our nation, the first woman to be dean at the Harvard Law School. Her intelligence has been acknowledged by all as a person who is very capable to be the next Associate Justice of the Supreme Court. Previous Solicitor Generals, including Charles Freed, Ken Starr, Ted Olson, and Paul Clement, both Democrats and Republicans, stated that Elena Kagan would, and I quote, bring to the Supreme Court a breadth of experience and a history of great accomplishment in the law, end quote. That's Democrats and Republican Solicitor Generals. She has the integrity. We've seen from third-party validators, both Democrats and Republicans, testimony to her integrity in her legal career. And she certainly has the temperament. She put up with the senators' interrogations with a calm demeanor and good humor, which I think will serve her well on the Supreme Court of the United States. She brings to this position experience as a clerk for Justice Thurgood Marshall. I've heard his name mentioned many times during this confirmation process. We in Maryland are particularly proud of Thurgood Marshall. He comes from the state of Maryland, comes from Baltimore. He was one of the great leaders on the Supreme Court, one of the great lawyers of our time. And I think we all are very proud of what America is today thanks to Justice Thurgood Marshall. And I think it only adds to the qualifications of Solicitor General Elena Kagan to have clerked for Justice Thurgood Marshall. I heard my colleague talk about her commitment to our military. Let me just point this out. It was a very difficult issue for Harvard Law School in regards to their policies. But let me just quote, if I might, from a letter from the Iraqi war veterans. During her time as dean, she has created an environment that is highly supportive of students who have served in the military. Under her leadership, Harvard Law School has also gone out of its way to highlight our military service. Students have complimented the way that she acted as dean to support our veterans. She comes from a military family. And in fact, during the time in question, the number of Harvard Law School students that were recruited into military service went up. So I think you got to look at the record here. And she has been extremely supportive of our veterans, extremely supportive of those who serve our nation in military service. And as a last point on this, let me quote from Mikel Estrada. I think most people know Mikel Estrada. He was nominated for the District Court, Circuit Court of Appeals, considered to be one of the conservative nominees. And he said, and I quote, "If such a person who has demonstrated great intellect, great accomplishments in an upright life is not easily confirmable, I fear we will have reached a point where no capable person will readily accept a nomination for judicial service." So I would hope that we all could agree that Solicitor General Elena Kagan is well qualified to serve as an Associate Justice on the Supreme Court of the United States. What we want from an Associate Justice is a judge who will follow legal precedent, giving due deference to Congress, following the best traditions of the Supreme Court, and protecting the rights of Americans against the abuses of power. To me, that is judicial restraint, to stay within the mainstream of American values. I believe a Solicitor General Kagan represents that best tradition of following legal precedent, giving due deference to Congress, standing up for ordinary Americans against the abuse of power. And for those reasons, I will vote to confirm her to be the next Associate Justice of the Supreme Court of the United States. During the confirmation hearings, I used that opportunity to explain to my constituents, indeed to the people of this nation, that Supreme Court decisions have real consequences on the lives of our constituents. If you are a woman, if you are a consumer, if you are a worker, if you're a voter, if you care about the air you breathe or the water you drink, you should be very concerned about the Supreme Court decisions. It affects your lives. I am very concerned, and I think my constituents are concerned, about recent 5-4 decisions where the majority of the so-called conservative justices legislated from the bench on the side of powerful corporate interest over protecting ordinary citizens. And during the confirmation process, I raised these issues and questioned Solicitor General Kagan on these cases, in which there were 5-4 decisions, which in my view reversed, well, they reversed precedent. In my view, they were legislating from the bench and they were restricting the rights of ordinary Americans. I mentioned the Ledbetter case. I know that the chair is very familiar with the Ledbetter case. Ledbetter case in which a 5-4 decision from the Supreme Court effectively told the women of our nation that they would have no effective rights to bring wage discrimination based upon gender. The Supreme Court basically said that the statute of limitation would run even if you didn't have knowledge of the discriminatory act. Lilly Ledbetter was denied her claim as a result of that decision. Well, I think it's going to be healthy for America to have more women on the Supreme Court of the United States. And when Elena Kagan is confirmed, she will, for the first time in America's history, be the 3rd woman out of 9 on the Supreme Court of the United States. I think that's going to give us more common sense justice in this nation, and certainly one that reflects the diversity of our country. Well, it wasn't just the Ledbetter case. There have been other cases in which workers have found the Supreme Court has ruled on the side of special interest corporate America over the rights of ordinary workers. In the Gross case, the Supreme Court reversed precedent here again by a 5-4 decision and ruled that we would use a different test for age discrimination, effectively denying claims by those who were discriminated against because of their age. Another example where the Supreme Court, the so-called conservative justices, reversed precedent, reversed the clear intent of Congress, ruled against workers in favor of corporate America. It's not just limited to worker cases or wage cases. In Citizens United, this is a case that we've talked about a great deal on the floor. Citizens United, the Supreme Court not only ruled against Congress, because we had legislated the McCain-Feingold bill, but ruled against prior Supreme Court decisions to reverse the rights of ordinary Americans in our election process. What the Citizens United case said, that corporate America could spend more on elections. Not already spending enough, but they could spend more. And even though Congress had passed bipartisan laws to rein in the amount of special interest corporate money, and even though those cases were upheld by the Supreme Court went out of its way by a 5-4 decision to rule on the side of corporate America against ordinary Americans. And here, if I might, let me quote from Justice Stevens in his dissent. Justice Stevens said, and I quote, essentially 5 justices were unhappy with the limited nature of the case before us. So they changed the case to give themselves an opportunity to change the law. There are principled, narrow paths that a court that was serious about judicial restraint could have taken, end quote. Well, I agree with Justice Stevens. And we all talk about wanting to see judicial restraint. We all talk about wanting to see a Supreme Court that will give due respect to the actions of Congress. We talk about following judicial precedent. We talk about following a tradition to protect your constitutional rights. Well, this Supreme Court, too many times by 5-4 decisions by the so-called conservative justices, have been the most activist court, rolling on the side of corporate America over ordinary Americans. It's true also in environmental cases, the Rapinos case. I have the honor of chairing the Water Subcommittee on the Environment and Public Works Committee. And we work very hard. Congress has worked very hard to protect our environment. It's not easy to get legislation passed in the Congress. I know all of us are frustrated that we can't get more legislation passed. But we've gotten some very important bills passed to protect our environment, the Clean Water Act. And we've protected our waterways. And the courts have upheld our power to do that. But in the Rapinos case, the court ruled again, by the narrowest of margins, on the side of corporate America against protecting our environment, against congressional intent, against prior decisions of the Supreme Court, ruling on the side of corporate America over protecting our environment for future generations. And that was also true just very recently in the Exxon Valdez versus Baker case. Now, this was particularly important because it took over a decade for those who were damaged by Exxon Valdez episode in Alaska to be able to get their claims brought through the courts. And the Supreme Court, again by the narrowest margins, reduced the claims of those who were damaged as a result of the Exxon Valdez spill. Now, I know all of us are very concerned about what's happening in the Gulf of Mexico. We want to make sure that BP is held fully accountable for all of its damage that it's caused. Well, we in Congress need to do our work to make sure that's done. And I expect we'll get it done. But we also need the Supreme Court of the United States to uphold the power of Congress to pass laws. We are the legislative branch of government. And too often, this so-called conservative majority of the Supreme Court have ruled in the other way. Well, I believe that Solicitor General Elena Kagan will follow in the best traditions of the Supreme Court. She will follow legal precedent, allowing Congress to legislate. I say that in part because of her testimony before our committee. I questioned Solicitor General Kagan as to our environmental statutes and the role that Congress plays. And she replied that, and I quote, "Congress certainly has broad authority under the Constitution to enact legislation involving the protection of our environment. When Congress enacts such legislation, the job of the courts is to construe it consistent with congressional intent." Well, that's the type of justice that I want on the Supreme Court in order to protect our air and protect our water, and yielding to Congress to pass the statutes rather than legislating from the bench. Basically, I want to make sure that the next Associate Justice of the Supreme Court is on the side of ordinary Americans. Once again, let me just quote from Solicitor General Kagan, which she said in her opening statement to the Judiciary Committee. When she was talking about equal justice under law, she said, quote, "It means that everyone who comes before the court, regardless of wealth or power or station, receives the same process and protections. What is promises is nothing less than a fair shake for every American," end quote. Well, that, again, is what I would like to see from the Supreme Court. I want them to be on the side of ordinary Americans, giving them a fair shake, protecting them from the abuses of power, whether that abuses come from the halls of government or comes from corporate America. In too many cases, this Supreme Court, by narrow margins, through the more conservative justices, have not been on the side of ordinary Americans. I believe that Solicitor General Kagan, as Associate Justice Kagan, will give Americans a fair shake, will continue in the best traditions of the Supreme Court in advancing your rights against the abuses of power, And for that reason, Mr. President, I intend to vote for the confirmation of Elena Kagan to be the next Associate Justice of the Supreme Court of the United States.